My name is Madison Hale, I'm 34 years old, and I've spent most of my life learning how to build structures strong enough to withstand storms. Ironically, the hardest storm has always been my own family. If you're watching this, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share the channel, because I promise you, stories like mine aren't just drama, they're warnings about what family can sometimes mean. It was a Tuesday evening in Chicago, 1 week before my younger sister Samantha's wedding. The snow outside the Loop had started to melt, leaving dirty slush in the gutters. I drove across the city to my father's office at Hale Development, a company he liked to call his empire, even though everyone in the industry knew it was crumbling. I knew the meeting wouldn't be good news. My father's assistant had called it a family strategy discussion, and that phrase alone set off alarms in my head. When I stepped into the conference room, the first thing I noticed was how staged it looked. The blinds were drawn even though the city skyline could have been a backdrop. A bottle of scotch sat open on the credenza. My father, Thomas Hale, was already in his leather chair at the head of the table, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. My mother, Elaine, sat beside him, hands folded neatly in her lap, like she was about to host a charity luncheon instead of an ambush. And there was Samantha, glowing in a cream sweater, scrolling through photos on her phone with a smile so sweet it almost looked rehearsed. "Madison," my father said, voice low but already carrying the weight of command. "Sit down. We need to talk." I dropped my coat on the back of the chair and sat, clutching my leather work bag like armor. "What's this about?" I asked. Elaine was the first to answer, her lips curling into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You know your sister's wedding is next week. It's an important union not just for Samantha, but for this entire family. The Carters are a well-respected family in New York. This marriage could open doors." "I've already been helping," I reminded her. "I covered the floral arrangements and secured the lighting team. That's $60,000 I didn't hesitate to spend because I wanted Samantha to have the best." Samantha finally looked up from her phone, eyes wide with innocence. "And I'm grateful, Maddie. But there's something more important than flowers or lights." I felt the air tighten. "Here it comes." Thomas leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "The Carters expect a demonstration of our commitment. They're not just marrying Samantha, they're evaluating this family, our legacy, our seriousness. My company is in negotiations with them for future projects, and..." He paused, then said it like it was already decided. "We agreed it would be best if you gave the Lake Tahoe house to your sister as her wedding gift." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Elaine jumped in before I could continue. "Madison, you don't need a mansion in Nevada. You live alone in Chicago. You spend your nights in drafting rooms. That house just sits there empty while you drown yourself in work. Samantha, on the other hand, is starting a family. She'll fill it with love and children. Doesn't that sound like a better use?" Her tone was syrupy, but every word was a knife. "It's not a mansion," I said evenly. "It's a lake house, and it's mine. I bought it outright with my own money. No inheritance, no co-signers. Every inch of it represents years of work." Thomas slammed his palm on the table, making the scotch glasses rattle. "This isn't just about you, Madison. This family needs unity. Hale Development needs this alliance with the Carters. If we don't show them generosity, if we don't prove Samantha is supported, we could lose everything." I swallowed the heat rising in my throat. "So you want me to sacrifice my sanctuary to patch up your sinking company?" "You call it a sanctuary," Elaine sneered. "I call it selfish excess. You're 34, unmarried, no children. What are you hoarding it for? At least Samantha is fulfilling her role." That word roll cut deeper than I wanted to admit. My whole life I'd been cast as the difficult one while Samantha was the princess. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes wide like a child asking for a toy. "Maddie, think about how happy it would make me. I'd finally feel equal to Brian's family. They already have vacation homes in the Hamptons and Aspen. The Lake Tahoe house would mean so much to us. To me." Her "us" was the final twist of the knife. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping loudly against the polished wood floor. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "No, I won't do it. That house isn't up for negotiation. It's protected under my executive compensation at Sterling & Co. There's a legal clause preventing forced transfer. You can't just decide for me." Thomas's face reddened. "You think hiding behind contracts makes you strong? Family should come before paperwork." I met his glare. "Maybe for you. But for me, contracts are the only thing that have ever protected what I built." Silence fell, heavy and sharp. Samantha's lower lip trembled like she might cry. Elaine muttered something about ungrateful daughters. Thomas refilled his glass with shaking hands. In that silence, I realized something chilling. This wasn't a request. It was a warning. They had already decided what role I would play in Samantha's wedding, and if I didn't give in privately, they'd find another way to take it publicly. I stood, sliding my bag over my shoulder. "I won't sign anything. I won't surrender my house. If you try to make this a spectacle, you'll regret it." My father's voice followed me as I reached the door. "Don't embarrass us, Madison. Family means sacrifice. Remember that." I turned just long enough to meet his eyes. "Then maybe I don't belong in this family." And with that, I walked out into the cold Chicago night, knowing the storm wasn't over. It was only gathering force. The warning my father hurled at me in Chicago still echoed in my ears. Family means sacrifice. I tried to shake it off on the flight to New York, but as the plane descended over Manhattan, the words stuck like thorns. I wasn't supposed to arrive until the wedding, but Samantha had begged me to join a small pre-wedding gathering at the Carters' penthouse on the Upper East Side. "Just cocktails and introductions," she'd said. My gut told me it would be more than that. The doorman greeted me with the kind of polished courtesy that screamed old money. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a marble-floored living room that overlooked Central Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows glittered with the city lights. Everything about the space whispered wealth, stability, and a quiet sort of power. Samantha was already there, perched on the arm of Brian's chair like a trophy. Brian, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, rose to greet me with a politician's smile. His parents, Richard and Margaret Carter, barely shifted from their leather armchairs. "Madison," Margaret said smoothly, extending a manicured hand. "So lovely you could make it. We've heard so much about your work." She let the word hang as if architecture were an eccentric hobby rather than the career I'd bled for. I shook her hand firmly. "I'm glad to be here. Congratulations on the wedding. Samantha's been counting down the days." Richard Carter poured himself a neat bourbon, his cufflinks catching the light. "It will be a good match. Our families share values, tradition, strength, legacy." He looked at my father, who had flown in earlier and was standing stiffly by the window. The two men exchanged a glance heavy enough to make my stomach tighten. Elaine chimed in sweetly, "And of course, every bride deserves a strong start." The conversation drifted at first wedding menus, the rehearsal dinner, the floral arch Samantha wanted for her vows. But I could feel the tension building under the small talk, like a string pulled taut. Finally, Margaret Carter leaned forward, her diamonds flashing. "Brian and Samantha will be starting their life together soon. It's important they feel secure. A young couple needs more than just a ceremony. They need a foundation, something permanent." Her gaze slid deliberately toward me. I felt my pulse quicken. Here it was, the real reason I'd been invited. Brian placed his hand on Samantha's knee, looking almost embarrassed. "My parents just mean that a home is more than a place to live. It's a statement. We've always believed in giving our children the strongest possible footing." Thomas cleared his throat and said too quickly, "That's exactly why our family has something special planned." I cut in before he could go further. "If this is about the Lake Tahoe property..." Margaret's smile didn't falter. "Ah, yes. We've heard Samantha and Brian have always loved the mountains. Lake Tahoe would be the perfect escape. Imagine starting married life with such a gift." Elaine nodded eagerly. "Madison hasn't been using it much anyway. It's just sitting there." Heat surged up my chest. "That house isn't sitting there, it's mine. I worked for it. No one handed it to me." Silence settled, broken only by the hum of the city outside. Richard Carter swirled his bourbon lazily. "In families like ours, assets are never just personal. They carry weight, influence. A property like that can ease business partnerships, smooth negotiations. Surely you understand that." There it was, the transaction. My sanctuary reduced to a bargaining chip in my father's failing business deals. Samantha's voice trembled as she tried to soften the blow. Maddie, please, think how much it would mean to me. To us. I looked at her, my baby sister, wide-eyed, perfectly styled, sitting in the lap of luxury, and for the first time I wondered if she even knew how complicit she was, or if she was just playing the role they'd written for her all her life. I forced my voice calm, though my hands tightened around my glass. You're asking me to give up what I earned so you can prove yourself to people who already have everything. No, that house isn't a gift to be demanded. The room chilled, Margaret's smile hardened. My father's jaw tightened, and I knew without a doubt that this was no longer just about a wedding. This was about leverage, image, and survival. As I left the penthouse that night, the cold February air on Fifth Avenue cut into my skin. The Carters had made their expectations clear, and my family had already promised what wasn't theirs to give. Some storms you see coming miles away. This one was already on the horizon, and I could feel the thunder building. By the time I landed back in Chicago, the city was wrapped in a thin layer of snow. The flight from New York was barely 2 hours, but it felt like I had aged years in the air. The Carters' words still rang in my ears. Assets are never just personal. My family had nodded along like puppets, and I knew now that what happened in that penthouse wasn't just pressure. It was a plan. I dropped my suitcase inside my apartment near the River North district and didn't even bother turning on the lights. The skyline glowed through the windows, steel and glass towers stabbing the night. It reminded me why I had built my life here. Structures didn't lie. They stood or they fell on their own strength. Families weren't always so honest. I dialed Noah. He picked up on the first ring. "You sound like you just walked out of a funeral," he said. "Close," I muttered, kicking off my heels. I just left the Carters' penthouse. They practically demanded I hand over the Lake Tahoe house. My parents nodded like it was already wrapped in a bow. Noah cursed softly. "I knew they'd try something, but to bring in the Carters too? That's not pressure, that's entrapment." I sank onto the couch, pressing my fingers to my temples. They're turning my life's work into a bargaining chip, and the worst part? They think I'll just smile and give in. There was a pause on the line. Then Noah said, "Then don't. But if they try to corner you in public at the wedding, maybe you'll need witnesses. Proof." I hesitated, then lowered my voice. "Would you record it if they try to pull something?" "Record it?" Noah scoffed. "Maddie, I'll live stream it. Let the whole damn world see what they're doing. I'll tag it, trend it, whatever it takes. They won't bury you in silence this time." A strange mix of fear and relief washed over me. "That's risky. You could get dragged into this," he chuckled. "I've been in your corner since we were kids sneaking Oreos from the pantry. If the Hales want to make a spectacle out of you, I'll make sure it's their downfall, not yours." I exhaled slowly, the knot in my chest loosening just a little. "Thank you." After we hung up, I pulled out the thick folder Ethan Sterling had once urged me to sign, my executive compensation agreement. Clause 15.3 stared back at me in black and white. In the event of coercion, attempted transfer under duress, or family interference, Sterling and Company reserves the right to intervene to protect the asset and the executive. Back then, I'd laughed at Ethan's paranoia. Tonight, I wanted to shake his hand all over again. I tucked the folder into my work bag, sat back, and whispered into the quiet apartment. They think they've written the script, but this time, I'm not playing the part. The storm was coming, and I wasn't going to run. I was going to build my own shelter, and this time, the walls would hold. By the time I returned to New York for the wedding, the city felt colder than the last trip. The February wind sliced through my coat as I stepped out of the cab in front of the Plaza Hotel. Its grand facade rose like a palace over Fifth Avenue, flags fluttering against the gray sky. Tourists paused to take photos, but I barely noticed. All I felt was the weight of what I was walking into. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of marble and chandeliers. Staff in black uniforms moved with military precision, guiding guests toward the ballroom. I smoothed the navy silk of my dress, checked that the pearl earrings were still in place, and forced my shoulders back. If they were going to stare, Let them see a woman who wasn't breaking. The ballroom itself was breathtaking, 200 chandeliers blazing like a field of stars, gilded mirrors reflecting the glow, and rows of round tables dressed in white linen. Gold-trimmed place cards gleamed at each seat, crystal glasses catching the light. To the guests, it looked like perfection. To me, it felt like a stage, set for a play I'd been cast in without consent. "Madison," Samantha's voice rang out as she floated across the room in a rehearsal gown, her hair swept into glossy curls. She kissed my cheek lightly, her perfume sugary and overwhelming. "Isn't it gorgeous?" The Carters wanted nothing less than timeless elegance. I nodded, careful not to betray the twist in my stomach. "It's beautiful. Exactly what you wanted." Her eyes glittered, though whether from joy or calculation, I couldn't tell. Brian's parents are thrilled. They keep saying this wedding will be remembered for years. I swallowed hard. Remembered, yes, but for what? From the corner of the room, I caught sight of my mother arranging flowers on the head table, her expression tight, as if every petal's placement determined the family's reputation. My father stood near the bar, already cradling a glass of whiskey, though the ceremony hadn't even begun. His face was flushed, his stance unsteady. A cousin brushed past me and whispered just loud enough to sting. "Still single at 34, huh? At least Samantha's giving your parents something to celebrate." Laughter bubbled from the group beside him. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to focus on the steady glow of the chandeliers instead of their words. I'd heard variations of that line my entire life, but tonight it cut sharper because I knew how little they saw me, how easily they erased the years of work that had built my career and that house in Tahoe. I wandered toward the grand windows overlooking Central Park. The view was stunning. The city stretched out in winter stillness. For a brief second, I let myself imagine the lake house, the way the water glistened under morning light, the silence of the pines, my sanctuary, my proof that I wasn't just the difficult daughter. But when I turned back to the room, I caught my father's eyes locking on me. He raised his glass slightly, like a warning instead of a toast. The message was clear. Tonight, I was expected to play along. And deep down, I knew this ballroom wasn't just decorated for a wedding. It was a trap, waiting for the curtain to rise. The music from the string quartet floated like spun sugar across the ballroom, wrapping the crowd in luxury. Waiters carried trays of champagne, laughter swelled, and flashbulbs popped as Samantha and Brian posed with the Carters under the arch of white roses. From the outside, it looked flawless, but I could see it in my father's face, the flush of whiskey, the restless tapping of his fingers on the stem of his glass. He wasn't just celebrating, he was waiting. The MC had barely finished announcing dinner service when Thomas rose abruptly from his chair at the head table. He grabbed a spoon and clinked it against his glass, the sharp chime cutting through the hum of conversation. The quartet silenced mid-note, and 200 heads turned toward him. My stomach sank. "Family," my father boomed, swaying slightly but grinning wide. "Means everything. And tonight, we celebrate not just Samantha and Brian, but the strength of what binds us all." Applause rippled politely. My mother placed a steadying hand on his arm as if to anchor him, but her eyes shone with anticipation. Thomas lifted his glass high. "And because family is about generosity, about sacrifice, we, the Hales, have prepared a gift that shows just how deeply we love our Samantha." I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed what was coming next, but I still prayed I was wrong. "With joy in our hearts," he declared, his voice booming across the golden chandeliers, "Madison has decided to give her sister and Brian the Lake Tahoe house as their wedding present." The ballroom erupted. Chairs scraped back, glasses clinked, applause thundered. Some guests even rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as though I had just handed over the keys on stage. Samantha gasped theatrically, her hand covering her mouth, but I saw it, the flicker of a smile she couldn't quite suppress. She turned to Brian, tears sparkling at the corners of her eyes. "Oh my God, I can't believe she did this," she whispered loudly enough for the front tables to hear. Elaine dabbed her eyes with a napkin, her voice carrying as she added, Madison's generosity knows no bounds. A true sister. Heat flared up my neck, a slow burn that reached my ears. My fists tightened in my lap. Around me, the guests leaned in. Selfless, one woman murmured. Amazing gesture, a man added. Another voice, louder, cut through. She finally did something right. Their words sliced deep, sharper than glass. I rose from my chair, my knees stiff, my chest pounding so loud I thought it would drown my voice. But when I spoke, it carried clear across the hall. That is not true. The room stilled. Forks froze halfway to plates. Samantha's smile faltered. My mother's head snapped toward me, her expression rigid. I kept my gaze fixed on my father. I never agreed to give away my house. Not now. Not ever. Gasps rippled across the tables. Guests turned, their champagne-fueled joy souring into confusion. Whispers spread like wildfire. Surely she's joking, someone muttered. Why ruin the moment? Another hissed. Thomas's face darkened. He slammed his glass onto the table, amber liquid sloshing over the linen. You will not embarrass your sister on her wedding day, he barked, voice shaking with rage. I stepped forward, my voice steady though my pulse raced. It's mine. I bought it, paid for it in full, and I will not have you stand here and rewrite my life to suit your deals. The applause had died. Now there was only the low buzz of disbelief, the rustle of silk dresses, the sharp inhale of scandal. From the corner of my eye, I saw Noah raise his phone, the red recording light glowing. He gave the slightest nod, and I understood whatever happened next would not be buried. For a moment, the ballroom held its breath, 200 people suspended between celebration and disaster, and then my father staggered toward me, eyes wild, jaw clenched, the trap snapping shut. My father's heavy steps shook the parquet floor as he moved toward me, whiskey glass forgotten on the table. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the vein pulsing at his temple. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, half expecting me to shrink back, to play the obedient daughter. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached for the microphone that still rested on its stand from the toasts. The weight of the metal in my hand steadied me. My voice, when it came, was calm, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, forcing myself to look out at the 200 faces turned toward me. I want to clarify something before this narrative gets carried away. The room hushed further. Even the waiters froze in place, trays balanced midair. My father has announced that I'm gifting the Lake Tahoe property to Samantha and Brian. I paused, letting the words hang. That is incorrect. That house is solely mine, purchased outright, earned through my work, and legally protected. It is not an asset anyone here can reassign with a speech. A ripple moved across the crowd. Whispers, raised brows, the rustle of sequined gowns. My father's face flushed deeper. Don't do this, he hissed, low but picked up by the mic. Don't humiliate this family. I met his glare, my hands steady around the mic. This family tried to humiliate me first. Gasps broke out. Someone near the back muttered, "She's right." I took a breath and leaned into the professionalism that had built my career. For those who don't know, I serve as lead design director at Weston and Grant Construction. The Tahoe residence wasn't a whim purchase. It was part of my executive compensation package, tied to projects worth over $200 million. By contract, it is protected against forced transfer. Phones lit up across the ballroom as guests started Googling. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her face blanching as the murmurs grew. I pressed on, my voice steady, precise. So, let's be clear. This house is not a family heirloom. It is not community property. It is not some symbol to barter away for business alliances. It is mine. And suggesting otherwise is not generosity, it is theft dressed as sentiment. The applause from earlier was gone, replaced by a brittle tension. Samantha's eyes shimmered with crocodile tears, but her lips trembled with fury. "Madison," she said, her voice pitched high. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let me be happy?" I turned toward her, my tone softening but not yielding. Because happiness built on taking what doesn't belong to you isn't happiness, it's entitlement. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the back tables. Someone whispered, "Finally, someone said it." My father lunged closer, gripping the mic stand, his breath hot with alcohol. "Enough. Sit down before you destroy your sister's wedding." I pulled the mic free of his grasp, my heart hammering but my words crisp. "You've mistaken silence for weakness. I've kept quiet my whole life, swallowed the comparisons, endured the backhanded comments, the erasure of everything I worked for. But not tonight. Not when you try to steal from me in front of strangers and call it love." The ballroom felt electrified, like the air before a storm. Noah's phone gleamed red in the corner, still streaming. I knew with a certainty that both terrified and liberated me that this would be remembered far beyond these walls. My mother suddenly stepped forward, her voice trembling but sharp. "She's lying. She's always been dramatic, always made things about herself. Madison, stop this act before you ruin us all." I locked eyes with her, the years of bitterness between us heavy in the air. If telling the truth ruins us, maybe we needed to be ruined. The silence that followed was deafening. Guests shifted in their seats, some nodding faintly, others staring at their plates as if afraid to be caught choosing sides. Brian's father, seated stiffly beside Samantha, cleared his throat. "Is this true? That the house isn't a family property?" I faced him directly. "Yes, and I can show you the deed." His jaw tightened, his discomfort visible. The Carters had wanted a trophy for their son's bride, but suddenly the trophy had teeth. Samantha's sobs grew louder, more performative. "You're ruining everything." I didn't flinch. "No, I'm saving what's mine." For a beat, the room stood still. 200 witnesses caught between old-world loyalty and the raw, undeniable clarity of contract law. And then my father's hand shot forward, rage spilling past reason. I saw it coming only a second before the impact. His hand came at me like a blur. One second I was standing tall behind the microphone, words still vibrating in the air, and the next his fist slammed into my chest. The shock ripped the breath out of me, as if the whole ballroom collapsed inward. I staggered backward. The mic screeched, then toppled from its stand. My heels caught on the edge of the parquet floor. My skull cracked against the sharp corner of a banquet table, and a white-hot explosion of pain burst through my head. Warm liquid streamed down the side of my face before I even registered what had happened. Gasps erupted all around me. Someone screamed. A chair clattered to the ground. Silverware hit the floor like scattered coins. "Dad, stop!" I heard Samantha's shrill cry, though it was laced more with panic over appearances than concern. The world tilted sideways. The chandeliers above blurred into halos of blinding light. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the polished wood, the cold seeping through my skin. Faces swam in and out of focus, guests with hands over their mouths, eyes wide with horror. Some turned away, whispering furiously. Others raised their phones higher, recording every second. I tried to breathe, but my chest burned where his fist had landed. Blood dripped warm and sticky across my temple, pooling on the white linen beneath the table. Through the chaos, I spotted Noah in the corner. His phone was still up, the red live icon glowing. His jaw was clenched, eyes blazing. He wasn't just filming anymore. He was making sure the truth survived. "Call 911!" a woman shouted. "Somebody help her!" another cried. But my mother's voice cut through, sharp and venomous. "She provoked him! She did this to herself!" The words sliced deeper than the wound on my head. Even as I lay bleeding, her instinct was to protect him and to blame me. The crowd shifted. Guests weren't just horrified now. They were choosing sides. One man near the front said, "This is assault." A woman at the next table hissed back, "She embarrassed her family in front of everyone." The tension buzzed like an electric wire, splitting the room into factions. The paramedics were still minutes away, but someone knelt beside me, Brian's mother, Mrs. Carter. Her trembling hands pressed a napkin against my temple, though the white fabric turned crimson in seconds. She whispered, almost to herself, "Oh my God, they've ruined everything." I tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. My chest ached, my throat raw from swallowed blood. The edges of my vision darkened. Above me, my father stood frozen, his chest heaving. The color had drained from his face, leaving him pale and trembling, yet his fist was still clenched. For a brief second, regret flickered in his eyes, but then he straightened, his jaw locking again, as if doubling down on his rage. "You don't shame me in my own house," he spat, though the words slurred. "This isn't your house!" I wanted to shout, but the sound caught in my throat. The ballroom was pandemonium. Some guests rushed toward the exit, unwilling to be caught in the scandal. Others crowded closer, hungry for every shocking second. The quartet's instruments lay abandoned, their bows resting on the floor, forgotten in the chaos. And all the while, phones were pointed in every direction. The glow of screens lit the room, capturing my blood, my father's fury, my mother's denial. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to one thought: this cannot end here. "Stay with us, Madison," someone said above me. Maybe Noah, maybe a stranger. My name echoed like an anchor, pulling me back from the edge of unconsciousness. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Relief swept the room like a collective exhale. But in the seconds before the EMTs arrived, I forced my eyes open one more time. Across the room, Samantha stood with mascara streaks down her face, clutching Brian's arm. Yet even through her sobs, I saw it. The twitch of anger in her expression, the calculation. This wasn't grief for me. This was fury that her perfect day had unraveled. And then the gurney was beside me, paramedics lifting me with practiced speed. Straps tightened around my shoulders, gauze pressed harder against my head. The ceiling lights blurred into a sterile white haze as they wheeled me out, past the crowd that parted like a wave. Just before the ballroom doors swung shut, I caught sight of Noah one last time, his phone still raised. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears, but I read them anyway. "They can't bury this now." The doors closed, cutting off the chaos, but the sound of sirens grew louder. And even as my body failed me, even as the darkness pulled me under, one thought repeated with every weak beat of my heart. This wasn't the end of the story. This was only the beginning. The first thing I heard was the beeping. Slow, steady, relentless. A sound I'd only ever associated with someone else's hospital room until now. My eyelids felt heavy, like weights had been stitched into them, but I forced them open. Harsh fluorescent lights stabbed into my skull, the white ceiling swimming in and out of focus. For a second I panicked, not knowing where I was. Then the sting at my temple reminded me. The ballroom, my father's fist. The table. A nurse leaned over me, her tone calm but firm. "You're at New York Presbyterian. You suffered a concussion and a laceration to your scalp. You're stable, but you need rest." Her words slid into me slowly, like pieces of glass. I reached instinctively toward my head, only to feel bandages wrapped tight, tugging against stitches I hadn't known were there. My chest burned when I tried to sit up. A second nurse pressed a hand to my shoulder. "Easy, you took a hard blow. 6 stitches, and we're monitoring for brain trauma. You're safe now." Safe. The word was bitter. How could I feel safe when the man who raised me had struck me down in front of 200 people? When my own mother's first instinct was to blame me? Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I would not give them the satisfaction, not even here. On the tray beside me, my phone buzzed. The nurse hesitated, then handed it over. "It hasn't stopped since you came in," she said softly. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, hundreds of messages, missed calls, alerts from social media. My hand shook as I opened the first link, and there it was, the live stream. Grainy but clear enough, my father declaring the house was Samantha's gift. My refusal, his fist, the sickening sound of my fall, the gasp of the crowd, blood spreading on the tablecloth, all of it preserved, replayed, dissected. The counter at the bottom of the video showed over 300,000 views. And climbing. Comments scrolled beneath, "This is assault. Arrest him." She stood her ground, finally someone brave enough to say no. Blood doesn't make family. Respect does. My chest tightened, a strange mix of humiliation and validation twisting together. For years I had been invisible, mocked, dismissed, erased. Now the world was watching, and for once, they believed me. The phone buzzed again. A name lit the screen that made my pulse jolt. Ethan Weston. I pressed the answer button carefully, wincing as the bandages tugged. His voice was low, steady, the way it always was in boardrooms when chaos threatened. "Madison, I saw the video." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat scraped like sandpaper. Finally, I whispered, "It's everywhere." "Yes," he said, "and that's not a bad thing, but you need to decide how you want to handle this." His words were like a lifeline. I could picture him at his desk in Chicago, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the strategist already moving pieces I hadn't yet imagined. "I don't want pity," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "I want consequences. They tried to take everything from me. Now I want them to lose what they value most." There was silence on the line, then a quiet exhale. "Then we start with the clause, 15.3. You remember why I insisted on it?" I did. At the time, it had felt paranoid, unnecessary. Now it felt like prophecy. "Yes," I whispered. "Good," he said. "Rest for tonight. Tomorrow, we act." The call ended, but the weight of it remained. For the first time since the ballroom, the rage inside me had direction. The nurse adjusted the IV at my arm, murmuring something about vitals. I closed my eyes, clutching the phone against my chest like a weapon. They had broken my body, but they had also handed me the one thing I'd never had before: proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof. And with that, the balance of power had shifted. The ballroom had descended into uneasy silence after Madison was wheeled out. The chandeliers still blazed, but the light felt harsher now, exposing every shaken face. Guests huddled in whispers, some replaying the video on their phones, others glancing nervously toward the Hale family at the head table. Then the double doors swung open. Ethan Weston walked in, tall and composed, flanked by two attorneys in charcoal suits. He moved with the authority of someone who owned the room before even speaking. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Every gaze shifted. Thomas's face drained of color. He knew what this meant. He had been chasing a contract with Weston and Grant for months, desperate to save his collapsing company. Now the man himself stood here uninvited. "Thomas Hale." Ethan's voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom, clear and steady. "We need to clarify some things." Elaine shot to her feet, clutching her pearls. "This is a family matter. You have no right to barge in." "It became public the moment your husband struck his daughter in front of 200 witnesses. Ethan cut her off, his tone sharp as glass. "And the moment this was broadcast live to hundreds of thousands more." Gasps rippled. Guests fumbled with their phones. Someone whispered, "It's already on CNN." Ethan gestured to one of his attorneys, who opened a sleek leather case and placed a stack of documents on the head table. "Clause 15.3 of Madison Hale's executive contract," Ethan explained evenly. "It states that any attempt to coerce the transfer of her Tahoe property triggers immediate legal action, with Weston and Grant authorized to intervene." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Guests leaned closer, eager to glimpse the pages. Thomas gripped the table, his knuckles white. "This is outrageous." "What's outrageous?" Ethan snapped, his composure still intact. "Is a man striking his own daughter because she refused to surrender what she earned. What's outrageous is trying to dress theft as generosity." One attorney clicked a remote. A projector screen descended, and the ballroom filled with the frozen frame of Madison's fall, blood glinting under chandelier light. Gasps echoed again. No one dared look away. Ethan let the silence stretch, then spoke with deliberate weight. "You can't bury this. Not with excuses, not with lies. The evidence is here. The world has seen it, and now, so have you." The ballroom was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. On the screen, Madison's fall looped once more before freezing on the image of her lying crumpled, blood against white linen. No one clapped now. No one dared speak above a whisper. Ethan Weston let the image hang like a verdict before he turned back toward the head table. His attorneys stood beside him, hands folded neatly, their briefcases stacked like weapons. "Thomas," Ethan began, his voice calm, almost surgical, "you've spent months chasing partnerships to cover the cracks in Hale Development. I've seen the proposals. I've seen the numbers. You're running out of leverage." Thomas stiffened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do." Ethan's tone sharpened, his gaze unwavering. "Because I reviewed your Midtown Tower bid last week. Shaky foundation permits, substandard steel, delayed safety inspections, corners cut to save money, and all of it buried under rushed reports." Gasps rippled through the guests, heads swiveled, whispers multiplied. The Carters looked stricken, their perfect composure unraveling as Brian's father leaned forward, jaw tight. "Is this true?" he demanded. Thomas sputtered. "Those documents are confidential." Ethan cut him off with a raised hand. "Not confidential when they endanger lives. Not confidential when your daughter's blood is spilled to protect your lies." He gestured to the screen behind him. "Do you think investors won't connect this violence to your crumbling empire? Do you think clients will trust a man who can't even control his own temper at his daughter's wedding?" Elaine reached for Thomas's arm, her voice brittle. "Stop engaging with him. He's twisting everything." "No!" Brian's mother snapped from across the table, her voice carrying like a crack of glass. "What twists everything is a father knocking his own daughter unconscious and then pretending it never happened." The room buzzed louder. Guests weren't whispering anymore. They were choosing sides. Some raised their phones higher, capturing every second. Others shook their heads in open disgust. Samantha clutched at Brian's sleeve, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Please make him stop," she sobbed, but Brian only pulled his arm away, his eyes fixed on the documents spread before them. Ethan leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You tried to stage an ambush, Thomas. You thought humiliation would silence her. Instead, it exposed you. Madison had the foresight to safeguard her assets, something you underestimated because you never believed she was smarter than you." The words landed like strikes, one after another. Thomas's face went crimson, then pale. His mouth opened, but no words came. Ethan straightened, his presence towering over the room. "Here's the truth everyone in this room now knows. Madison Hale is not weak. She is not selfish. She is the only one here who built something with integrity, and you tried to steal it." Silence fell again, heavy and final. For years, this ballroom had been the Hales' stage, their kingdom of polished silverware and whispered favors. But tonight, stripped under the glare of truth and technology, it became their undoing. Brian's father finally rose, adjusting his tie with cold precision. "The Carters will not align our family with liars and abusers," he announced. His words hit like a gavel. He turned to his son. "Brian, we're leaving," Samantha cried out, but Brian followed his parents, leaving her clutching empty air. The guests watched, phones recording every step, and in that moment, Ethan didn't need to say anything else. The intellectual strike had landed, Thomas Hale was finished, and everyone knew it. By morning, the Plaza scandal was everywhere. Clips of my father's fist, the blood on the linen, Ethan's takedown they cycled on every major network. Hashtags with my name trended on Twitter. Talk shows replayed the footage in slow motion. Panelists arguing whether this was a family feud or corporate corruption exposed. Outside New York Presbyterian, a wall of cameras lined the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions at every person entering the building, hoping for a glimpse of me. My nurses had to wheel me through a service elevator just to keep the press away, but my parents weren't so lucky. By noon, Thomas and Elaine tried to slip out of the plaza's side entrance, only to be ambushed by flashing bulbs and microphones. The video played on repeat. Elaine shielding her face with a clutch bag, Thomas pushing through the crowd, his jaw set in stone. "Mr. Hale, do you admit to striking your daughter?" one reporter barked. "Was the Lake Tahoe property part of a deal with the Carters?" Another pressed. "Do you intend to resign from Hale Development?" Thomas shoved past, muttering, "No comment." His silence didn't read as strength, it read as guilt. Elaine snapped, her voice sharp. "She provoked him! She always provokes him! Madison has no respect for family values." The microphones caught every word. Within an hour, the clip was viral. Elaine Hale calling her bleeding daughter provocative while defending her husband's violence. The public didn't rally to her. They tore her apart. Comment threads burned with outrage. Imagine blaming the victim when the victim is your own child. Elaine Hale is the real poison here. Sponsors began pulling out. One luxury hotel group announced on Twitter that they were suspending their partnership with Hale Development. A construction supplier followed suit, citing serious concerns about ethical conduct. From my hospital bed, I scrolled through the chaos. My father looked 10 years older in every photo. My mother's eyes darted wildly, her mask of composure cracked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. And the jury wasn't a handful of relatives around a holiday table. It was the entire world. The backlash didn't stop with my parents. It rolled downhill fast, sweeping Samantha into the wreckage. 3 days after the wedding debacle, the Carters released a polished statement. Our family values integrity above all. Effective immediately, we are severing ties with the Hales. It wasn't just rejection, it was a public execution. Every society column reprinted the words, each headline another nail in Samantha's perfect day coffin. She tried calling Brian. Dozens of times. The tabloids got hold of the call logs, and soon screenshots splashed across gossip sites. Unanswered calls, texts left on read. The woman who had once strutted through Manhattan in designer gowns was now being humiliated in group chats and Twitter threads. At a midtown cafe, a photographer caught her slumped over a cappuccino, mascara smudged, hair undone. The caption read, "From Plaza Princess to Pariah in 72 hours." Meanwhile, Hale Development bled out. Banks froze lines of credit. The Midtown Tower project was suspended pending safety investigations, exactly as Ethan had predicted. Subcontractors walked off sites, demanding payments Thomas couldn't make. I lay in my hospital bed scrolling through it all, a strange numbness coating me. For years, I had been the one absorbing the family's cruelty. Now the arrows were flying back at them, and I wasn't lifting a finger. Elaine tried damage control, booking a morning show interview to set the record straight. Instead, she melted down on live TV, snapping at the host and blaming a smear campaign led by Madison's employer. The clip went viral within hours. The internet christened her Gaslight Queen. As for Thomas, he disappeared from sight. No press conferences, no statements, just silence while his empire caved in piece by piece. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had tried to strip me of my dignity, my home, my future, all in the name of appearances. And now, it was their appearances that destroyed them. Watching Samantha's fall hit hardest. She had always been the chosen one, the family jewel. Seeing her splashed across tabloids as a cautionary tale, I realized something with a clarity that almost hurt. For the first time, I wasn't the one left in the shadows. Samantha had always thrived on being adored the golden girl, the flawless bride-to-be. But the pedestal she'd been placed on crumbled faster than even I expected. Within a week of the Plaza disaster, she became a walking headline. Jilted at the altar of greed, read one cover. Another splashed her crying face across the page with the caption, "From heiress to outcast." The Carters refused her calls, her texts, her desperate late-night messages. Brian himself blocked her number. When she showed up at his office lobby in a cream trench coat and sunglasses, security escorted her out. Someone filmed the whole thing by nightfall. The video had over 2 million views. At a downtown cocktail lounge, 2 women whispered as Samantha stumbled past them in heels that wobbled like stilts. "That's her," one said. "The sister who let her dad assault the other one. Imagine." Samantha's head whipped around, eyes blazing, but she didn't speak. For the first time, she had no script. Her social circle evaporated. Invitations dried up. Even the boutiques that once held dresses aside for her suddenly had nothing in stock. And when she moved into a cramped apartment off Queens Boulevard, paparazzi were there too, snapping photos of her dragging suitcases up 3 flights of stairs. The girl who once floated above the city now stood on its sidewalks, mascara streaking, muttering into her phone to no one. Watching from my hospital bed, I felt no triumph, only a quiet clarity. Samantha wasn't the untouchable goddess I'd grown up competing with. She was just human, fragile, and now, finally, accountable. The stitches came out 2 weeks later. The scar was small, hidden by my hairline, but every time I caught sight of it in the mirror, it reminded me of a turning point. Pain had marked me, but it hadn't broken me. When I returned to Chicago, my office felt different. Colleagues who once looked past me now paused in the hallway, offering quiet nods of respect. Some even stopped by my desk, saying things like, "What you did took courage," or "You handled yourself with strength." Their words didn't erase the past, but they built something new, a sense that I wasn't invisible anymore. Ethan called me into the executive boardroom one morning. Sunlight poured across the long mahogany table as he slid a folder toward me. Inside was a promotion letter, Vice President of Design and Development. My throat tightened. "I wouldn't offer this if you hadn't earned it," he said. "Not because of what happened, but because you've proven, time and again, that you see things others miss. You're ready." I traced my fingers over my name printed in bold. For years, I'd been dismissed as the difficult daughter, the one who never measured up. Now I was being recognized on my own terms. That evening, standing by my apartment window overlooking Lake Michigan, I let myself breathe. The city lights glittered like 1,000 tiny promises. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was steering my own life, building something no one could strip away. The scar on my temple throbbed faintly, but instead of shame, it carried pride. Proof that I had endured and that I had won. The conference hall at the Chicago Architecture Foundation was filled with young faces, students, interns, dreamers with notebooks clutched in their hands. I stood at the podium, my scar faint beneath my hairline, my new title vice president emblazoned on the program beside my name. Today wasn't about business deals or headlines. Today was about planting something that would last. With great pride, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "I'm announcing the Eleanor Brooks Scholarship, named after my grandmother, the one person who always told me I could build more than walls. I could build a life." Applause rose, warm and thunderous. I saw tears glisten in the eyes of a young woman in the front row, a hard hat resting in her lap. "This scholarship will support women in architecture and engineering, especially those who, like me, were told they didn't belong, or that their voice wasn't worth hearing." The applause grew louder, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. For the first time, I felt not just vindicated, but rooted, like I was finally standing in the right story, my story. Ethan caught my eye from the side of the stage and gave the smallest nod, but I didn't need his validation anymore. This was mine. Looking back, I understand now that strength isn't born from never falling. It's born from standing up after you've been knocked down, sometimes by the very people meant to protect you. My family tried to erase me, but in the end, they only taught me the value of claiming my own voice. I've learned that blood isn't the definition of family. Respect, love, and honesty are, and no amount of wealth or status can replace the power of integrity. What once felt like scars have become reminders. I am not what they said I was. I am what I chose to become, and so are you. So if you've ever been told you're too much, too difficult, or not enough, remember this. Your worth isn't decided by them. It's decided by you. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear these words today. And I'd love to know, what's the legacy you want to build? Drop your thoughts in the comments.